I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
We often think about maximizing happiness. We have the right to pursue happiness. But the things that truly give us long-term joy are not really the things that give us happiness. It's kind of an interesting conflict. Like if you thought about every day and you say, I just want to be happy today, what are the kind of things you would do? Probably get drunk more. You would probably watch more sitcoms. But the things that give us pleasure over the lifetime are not those, right? If you lived all your life and you got drunk every night and you watched 2 sitcoms every day, you would not end your life and say, this was an amazing life. The things that we do that get us to feel that we've done something and get us the true deep sense of happiness and accomplishment are things like running a marathon and climbing a mountain and writing a book and inventing something. And those are things that don't maximize momentary happiness. They maximize a very different sense of happiness. And I think that we over-focus on a daily happiness, give up on the long-term happiness, and in the process don't do things well. And we don't do it in our own personal lives, and we don't do it at the workplace.
What you're saying is, I'm going to live life in such a way that the people around me could potentially find more meaning in their lives. Dan Ariely, is that how you say the name? Ariely?
Ariely is kind of in English. Ariely, more in Hebrew. I don't mind so much anyway. How about Dan?
Dan, very good. You've been on the podcast before, so I should remember how to pronounce your name. But
you shouldn't.
You are the author of Predictably Irrational, Irrationally Yours, the honest truth about dishonesty, the upside of irrationality, the recent documentary on dishonesty, which was excellent.
Thank you.
And your new book, just out, Payoff, which talks about motivation.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk a little about that, but I kind of want to talk about everything. Is that okay?
Everything is great.
So it seems like, first, motivation is really related to a lot of the topics you cover in dishonesty, and in a weird way, because sometimes there's this edge between motivating someone and maybe being a little bit on the gray area of being dishonest. But let's hold that off for a second. Tell me about motivation, about payoff, just from your description of the book.
Yeah. Okay. So
Excellent
you're
book, by the
tempting
way.
me. Thank you. But you're tempting me by going to motivate to dishonesty. But okay, we'll talk about. So
Or if you tell me that the book is the greatest book ever, then
No.
then we could segue into dishonesty.
Okay. So the reason for me to write this book was that I observed some things about my own life that seemed to be kind of counter to the principle of looking for happiness. And
So meaning you in your own life were looking for some achievement or goal or theme that would not necessarily make you happy.
That's right. So I start the book by describing a very difficult case I had with a kid who was burned much worse than I was.
And just backstory, can you tell that backstory?
Yeah, so I was badly burned, about 70% of my body. I spent about 3 years in hospital when I was a teenager. And, kind of being ripped out of life and being put on a bed for so many years. And, even though I'm now 49, it's been a while, I still had surgery last year, right?
What was the surgery for last year?
Last year, actually, I'll send you a picture if you want to see. Actually,
I
can
do want
we
to see.
Can we show something on?
Yeah.
So I'll keep on saying as with this, but one of the things that happen with severe burns is that they keep on shrinking, and kind of dealing with shrunk scars. So, for example, if I move my hand, my neck moves a little bit, right? Because the skin is like one piece; it doesn't have the flexibility of regular skin. That's what scars are. So my scars got a little tightened up. Here you can see this picture of this surgery.
So I'm looking at a picture of the right side of you, and there's a scar up and down the arm.
That's right. And you see this zigzag shape.
Yeah.
This is called a plastic Z. So what happened is that you have a scar that goes straight through, and it just gets tight like a rope. And if you make it like this, it's like make it like accordion, right? And all of a sudden you have a Z, and now it has extra flexibility. You can push it up and down. So anyway,
so they what they do is then they stretched out.
What they do is they interleave a piece of healthy skin with unhealthy skin to create this zigzag, and now you can have a little accordion movement where you can stretch up and down. But even though it was a long time ago, I'm still having challenges and pain and surgery and so on. It's not something that goes away. So it's kind of the backstory, but also it's a story of my life. I have limitation in my hands. I have pain in all kinds of places. It's not as bad, right? I had terrible 3 years in hospital. Everything after that has been better.
And obviously you had terrible pain in the hospital.
Oh,
I imagine the pain is not as great now.
Yeah, burns are some of the worst pain there is, because, it's the removing bandages when your nerves are growing. So imagine your skin is gone and the nerves are growing, and as they grow, somebody tears bandages off, because the bandages also, because there's no skin. If you have a regular plaster, it's on top of the skin, and the skin doesn't adhere to the bandage. But if you have bleeding arm, because there's no skin, the bandages basically kind of become one with your flesh. It's incredibly hard to take it off.
And so just to set the further context, a lot of the work you've done on irrational behavior started from your study of, was it correct for the nurses to rip off the bandages fast as opposed to slow?
That's right.
And so they almost engaged in irrational behavior, but for predictable reasons.
That's right.
And that became the initial basis of your work. But I think this book, Payoff and Motivation, is actually getting you closer to the heart of what happened to your life.
It is, and I start with this story about the kid who was burned worse than I were, and I was kind of tangentially involved a little bit in some decisions about his life with his mother, and it made me realize all kinds of things about my own past. It also got me to kind of confront his misery and so on. But the point of the story in the book is that when I look at a lot of the things I'm involved with, they're just painful. They're miserable.
Like what?
Trying to help somebody else who's really suffering.
So in this case, I found it very interesting. So this is in the first chapter of the book. This woman calls you, and her 2 sons have been burned badly, and she wants your advice and help. You didn't know her in advance, and you went and helped. And that's a really good thing to do. I mean, so the first question is, a lot of times people call many people for help, and not everybody responds. Like, what did you respond because of your own real intense history with burn?
So the first answer is yes, but I try to respond to lots of things. I wrote in a very public way about my injury and the challenges and so on. And when people reach out to me, it's kind of a continuation of a discussion. After Predictably Irrational, maybe 6 months after it was out, I was on a flight and I sat next to a woman, and she was so happy it was me because she said that she was a diabetic patient. And she was debating whether to install an insulin pump or to take insulin every day with an injection. And she said that after reading Predictably Irrational, she had in her mind a discussion with me about what to do. And then she said that in her mind, I told her she should install an insulin pump, and that's what she did, went ahead and did. And we actually had a discussion. I told her I agreed with her analysis. That's indeed what I would have told her. But I feel that, because I'm writing about social science, but I'm also writing about my life, I feel that I kind of start a discussion with lots of people. And if people reach out to me, it's kind of a continuation of a discussion. It's not that people are reaching out of the blue, but I write something, they want to react, they have a question and so on. And there's some relationship of give and take, and I try to respond as much as possible.
And so in this case, it was particularly painful after a few days. One of this woman, so she had 2 sons in the hospital, and one passed away, and the other was facing excruciating pain.
That's right.
So didn't even know that his brother had died.
That's right. So in the beginning, she asked me what to tell her kids. And that was very tough, like what to say, not to say. Then when one son passes away, she asked me whether to tell the other son about the one that passed away. And she gave me these really tough moral dilemmas of what to say, but it the story continues. And after that, she asked me to when her surviving son a few months later was kind of out of risk for dying, she asked me to send him an optimistic letter about how his life will turn out. And I was not too optimistic, right? I've been many years after the initial injury, but life is tough. Life is tough as a injured person, and it's certainly not going back to normal. And I didn't know to lie, to be truthful, how much to lie, also with my research on dishonesty. And I actually cried a lot in those days, really debating what to say, how optimistic should I be, what can I say, and so on. And eventually I found some compromise I was happy with. I told him that he'll never have a normal life, that he shouldn't expect one. But I also told him that technology is on the side of people with injuries. Like, we get disproportionate help from technology. And I also said that the workplace is changing, and you can find all kinds of ways to contribute to the world. It doesn't have to be in the 9-to-5 approach. And he needs to take more control, figure out his path in life, but it will not be easy, but he will find something. So I kind of it was a mix of being truthful and motivating, but not. I also told him, by the way, that he needs to realize that he has quite a few years ahead of him of misery, and it will go dark from time to time, but the time will pass. So I didn't tell him all the miserable things. So, but the real. So okay. So and then when I went to visit him in hospital quite a while later, I didn't know how it would feel, but it was actually quite good. He couldn't talk that much. He still had challenges with his vocal cords. When they put the thing to breathalyze him, they injured his vocal cords. That's one of the things. Is you go into hospital for one thing, you get other things as well. But anyway, the discussion was good. I spent about 3 hours with him, and it was quite good. But there was this moment when the nurse came, and she told him he was going to have a new treatment. And I knew that the treatment he was going to have, and it wasn't something I enjoyed, but it was new for him. And, I kind of remembered what it was. And then he started negotiating with her. And he said, can I do it tomorrow? And she said, no. He said, can I do it in a few hours? She said, no. Can I do it in an hour? No. Can I do it in one just part of my body? No. And at that point, I was just too weak to stand. I just sat down and I put my head between my legs, and I was just trying to breathe heavily because I remember all these futile negotiations I had in hospital. And when I thought about hospital all these years, I mostly thought about the objective aspects of being in pain, and I didn't really feel or think as much to the feeling of being helpless. But this discussion between him and the nurse kind of brought all the feeling of being helpless. Somebody else is determining your day and your routine and when you'll have pain, and everything about it was determined by other people. And I kind of realized how important being in control is.
And this question happens obviously in a high stakes situation like in a hospital, but really in many people's daily lives, like when you feel like a boss has control over your life, or a spouse, or friendships, or whatever, or
a political election, whatever
political
it is.
election. Yeah, a lot of people attribute all their dreams and hopes to whichever superhero they have wins an election.
Yeah. So I start the book with this story, and for me there are kind of two lessons there. One is the kind of the lesson of understanding the importance of control and the devastating part of being out of control. But the second thing is about what drives me to do those things, right? And if you look at this process of helping this kid, there were no moments of joy there. There were no moments when I was, smiling from ear to ear or particularly happy. Or if you image my brain as I was going through it, you would not see something that looked like joy. Nevertheless, even though it was painful and even though I cried, like everything I exhibited was of misery, I felt it was important and useful and something that attracted me to participate in this rather than run away from it. And it made me realize that we often think about maximizing happiness. We have the right to pursue happiness. But the things that truly give us long-term joy are not really the things that give us happiness. It's kind of an interesting conflict. Like if you thought about every day and you say, I just want to be happy today, what are the kind of things you would do? You'd probably get drunk more. You would probably watch more sitcoms. But the things that give us pleasure over the lifetime are not those, right? If you lived all your life and you got drunk every night and you watched 2 sitcoms every day, you would not end your life and say, this was an amazing life. The things that we do that get us to feel that we've done something and get us the true deep sense of happiness and accomplishment are things like running a marathon and climbing a mountain and writing a book and inventing something. And those are things that don't maximize momentary happiness. They maximize a very different sense of happiness. So think about a marathon. Every moment is miserable, right? There's no moment in which you say, oh my goodness, this is just amazing. But
even training for it.
But it does give people a tremendous sense of happiness that comes from achievement and meaning and accomplishing things and so on. And I think that we over-focus on a daily happiness, give up on the long-term happiness, and in the process don't do things well. And we don't do it in our own personal lives, and we don't do it at the workplace.
So there's 2 things there. One I wanted to hit on, which is you use the word meaning, and I really see this book pay off. And it's almost an unfortunate title. I agree with the title. I'm not criticizing it. It's done is done. But I really see this as almost like, in a weird way, a sequel to Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, because how did he stay? Obviously, it's an extreme case. Okay, I'm not.
No. I'm just saying that book. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't want to be put in the same category with Viktor Frankl.
Maybe he's the best book. Maybe that's the best book ever. So, but I just wanted to say, though, he's in this horrific situation where it seems like there's no way out and there's nothing to hope for, and yet he finds that the reason for his survival and for perhaps many of the survivors is that they found something to attach meaning to. For him, he wanted to see his wife again. That was one, and he never did, but that was one thing that he found meaning in that kept him going. And the other is that he had this idea that he wanted to write about, and that kept him going.
Yeah, and it is an amazing book, and it's a very important book, and he of course takes some of the darkest periods in man's history, and basically kind of say how do you shift your mindset from kind of pure desperation and fear into something that you can live with and try to find motivating. And he does it in all kinds of ways, like looking for his wife, and enjoying small things that happen. And I think those are the kind of lessons that I'm trying to break. We're trying to break down in the research, right? So some of the empirical investigations are around that, a bit more mundane, right? We build Legos, we don't create.
You don't put people in a concentration camp.
That's right. Yeah, you have choices. Like, what do you do? Which experiments do you do? Do you decide to do the Legos? But it is kind of the small version of feeling desperate and hopeless. And
well, and then the other thing you sort of say is there's a difference too between motivating others, saying things to motivate others, or doing actions to motivate others, and self-motivation. So in Viktor Frankl's case, he's self-motivating. In the case with you and this patient, you were trying to motivate him to be a little more optimistic. Or in the case of a classic case, boss with employees, a boss is usually trying to say things or do things or provide incentives to motivate employees.
That's right.
So I want to talk about self-motivation in a little bit, but let's talk like motivating others really reminds me a lot of, like, you use the word motivation, other people use persuasion, other people use selling. Like, what's the difference between, because also a negotiation, the other side, you're negotiating with them to be happy or to do what you want to do, and you're using all sorts of techniques. It's almost a trade. So how would you distinguish between motivation and, let's say, just pure selling?
Okay, so I'm not sure it's an ideal definition, but I think of increasing motivation as something that everybody benefits from. So let me give you an example.
What do you mean?
So imagine two workplaces or two homes or two environments. Let's just say two factories. In one of them, the employees are demotivated. What happens? The employees are miserable. They show up, they're unhappy, they don't like what they're doing, and so on. And productivity is low, and the people who are managing the place are not benefiting a lot. The second place, people are happy. Employees are happy. They come to work, they enjoy what they're doing, they feel accomplished, motivated, and so on. They produce more, and the people who run the place are happier as well. And for me, motivation is the key to just provide more of everything for everybody, right? If you come to work or you come home and you're just happy with what you're doing, everybody benefits.
So it's interesting because you're sort of suggesting that, let's say you're a boss / husband / friend, there's probably a way to live your life that is motivational and inspiring to the people around you, and in general have them respond to you better and produce better work. You basically create your world by being a more motivational sort of person. And so what are some attributes of that type of person?
But wait, so if you say like selling seems to me like a zero-sum game, right? I want you to buy something and I need to persuade you to buy something. There's a transaction. And if you buy, I win, and if you pay more, I'm better off, and so on.
But they're like shades, though, because motivation could be,
of course,
it's not always win-win. Like if you needed employees to stay working over the weekend, you have to figure out the right incentive. Is it a pizza? Is it a compliment? Is it money?
Yeah.
And so that's a transaction too. So there's shades.
There are transactions, but I want to argue that the main metaphor is the pie can get larger.
Okay.
And we have to figure out that the pie can get larger, and our goal is not just to transfer wealth from one person to another, but to make everybody better off. And we can do that, right? So I would be unhappy if people basically looked at this as a way to say, oh, I want to abuse people.
Right, so it's
here's
not
another way.
like your motivation is not the same as manipulation, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so let's dig down on that. So, what are basic attributes of someone who wants to live a motivational life so people are responsive to them?
Yeah. So, if you remember the stuff we did on the Bionicle experiments, which was very much taken from Viktor Frankl. So the experiment was very simple and about small meaning. People came to the lab and we say, hey, would you like to build some Bionicles, Lego? And they said yes. And we say, okay, we'll pay you $3 for the first one. And they start building the first one and they finish it. And then we say, would you like to build another one for $2.70? And they say yes. And we take the first one and put it under the table and they build the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, until the pay wage is so small that they say no, right? And different people stop at different points. Other people, this is the condition by the way we call the meaningful condition. And we told everybody that when we finish the experiment, we're going to disassemble all the Bionicles, put them back in their boxes, and have them ready for the next participant. In the second experiment, we gave people the first Bionicle, $3. They finished building it. We took it back. We kept it on the same table. We kept it on the table that we were sitting across from them. We said, would you want another one? They said yes. We gave them the second one. And as they were building the second one, we were taking apart the first one and putting the pieces back into the box.
So they saw explicitly the meaninglessness of
That's
their
right.
work.
Yes. And then we asked them if they want to do a third one. And if they said yes, we gave them the first one, the one that they built and we destroyed. And that kept on going back and forth and back and forth. And we call this the Sisyphic condition. If you remember the story of Sisyphus was punished by the gods to push the same rock up a hill. And when it almost got there, the rock just went down all the way. And you can imagine how if it was different hills, right? Imagine there were like 1,000 hills and you would just do the first and the second, the fourth. You will still have a sense of progress. But having to push the rock up the same hill all the time is kind of the essence of, demotivation. And we basically found three things. The first one was that people stopped much faster, right? So the Sisyphic condition got people to stop faster. People got paid, right? So if people were just there for the money, they would have continued in the same way. But seeing your work destroyed in front of your eyes has some demotivating aspect. The second thing was that we asked people how much they enjoyed Legos in general. And what you expect is that people who enjoy Legos get some more internal value from it, would continue working even for lower wage because they enjoy it more. And in the meaningful condition, we got a nice correlation. People who loved Legos persisted more. People who didn't like Legos persisted less, as you would expect. In the Sisyphic condition, the correlation was zero. Right? What happened was that we kind of sucked the joy out of it. The people who usually enjoy Legos basically did not produce more than the people who didn't like it. Kind of the internal value of Lego, of building Lego and enjoying it, just went away.
Because even as they're leaving the room, they could still turn back and see, that's what I created. It might be destroyed at some point in the future, right. But I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, and these were decisions they were making as they were building those things. So what happened is if you're building and nothing is destroyed in front of your eyes, you can at least imagine that it's not futile. But so many times you see things destroyed in front of your eyes, and the sense of futility is just very hard to deal with. The last thing we discovered was when we took this experiment and we described it to some MBA students, and we said, please predict how many Bionicles people would make in this condition, how many will they make in this condition. We wanted to get a sense of how big is the effect of meaning, right? Do people think that meaning is equal 1 Bionicle, 2 Bionicles, 3 Bionicles? And what we saw was that people realized that the meaningful condition will have higher production than the other one, but they thought the effect was very small. So we understand that meaning is important, but we think it's a tiny effect, where in fact it's a much, much bigger effect.
So taking it out of the lab and giving it to the listener right now, what's one thing they can do in their lives to help the people around them find more meaning? Because what you're saying is, I'm going to live life in such a way that the people around me could potentially find more meaning in their lives.
Yeah.
And that will in turn create this larger pie.
Yeah. So the Bionicle experiment is not about it's about creating more meaning by stop destroying meaning, right? Because we didn't enhance the meaning from the regular condition, we just destroyed it, and we saw how easy it is to destroy it. And I think the first lesson is look at life and look at how many times we're destroying meaning. We get people to do things that are futile.
Like what?
We ask people to submit reports that nobody ever look at. We ask people, we ask students to write papers that we never grade and give them deep feedback on. I mean, we do lots of things that we don't treat the labor as being useful and contributing. And
Do you think this is related? This seems like a big customer service thing lately. Like if I call, let's say my phone doesn't work, and I call the phone company. Sometimes I say, no matter what I say, this is my problem, and the first thing they say to me is, "Oh, that sounds like a horrible problem. I'm really sorry you're going through that." Is that their attempt at giving meaning to my insignificant phone problem?
I'm not sure it's about meaning, but it is about being heard. So it is about you are a person, and we understand where you're standing from. So it's not meaning in the regular sense, but it is validation.
But they're not destroying
right.
my feeling that this is important.
That's right. So I think that's the first lesson. Is let's just look at the places where we destroy the feeling of contribution and so on. That when I was still teaching at MIT, we got this new system of SAP. And this was like an accounting system. And my assistant became like an SAP slave. He all of a sudden, all the things he had to do was to put stuff into SAP and press a button, and then it will go to somebody else to press another button. And he was just completely demotivated, right? There was nothing that he was doing that felt meaningful. He was just like a slave to this bureaucratic system.
But that's a very common thing, like in the workplace, when suddenly, let's say as a company moves from small business to big business, often employees start to have to fill out, well, here's how I spent my hours per day.
That's right.
And that's not for a meaningless reason. It's for a reason, are we correctly allocating people? How can we save time, save money, and so on?
Well, I'm not sure. So first of all, I think we need to stop destroying motivation. The second thing about increasing motivation, there's lots of things that give meaning. So the open source software movement, for example, benefited a lot from making a simple rule that says that every time you write a piece of code, your name is going to be associated with it forever. Think about what it does. It basically puts your stamp on something, right? Maybe the metaphor of dogs peeing in the side, but you're saying this is mine. It's always going to be mine. And that created tremendous sense of motivation. Now all of a sudden you can have your stake. So think about this idea of giving people credit. We are so terrible in sharing credit. I see so many people fight on whose idea was it. I understand this. Of course, everybody wants to feel that it's their idea and it's their contribution and so on. But in the world, credit is not a zero-sum game. We can share credit around, everybody's happier. So how do we give a sense of meaning? We give people credit. We let people put their names on things. We say thank you for their contribution. We basically do all kinds of things to basically say, this is yours, and I appreciate it that you've done this.
And I should say this doesn't flow in one direction. So we often think of a boss giving employees credit, for instance, but employees can give a boss credit too, and which is a very unusual move, and that often creates a lot of goodwill going down the road.
Yeah, it's not just about you're right. It's not about just management. It's about everything we do, right? It's true for how you deal with your significant other and how you deal with your kids.
A lot of it has to do with presence too, like recognizing that somebody did something.
Mm-hmm.
So often particularly with spouses, they often like tune out each other's basic routines, but acknowledging them suddenly can change the whole relationship by adding meaning to it.
Yeah, there's a study by Mike Norton and a few other people that they basically said, almost everything online, we don't see how much effort people put into it. Like you do a Google search, just you get there. But do you know how much effort was put into it? What was going on? So they say kayak seems to be the one exception. Kayak, kayak. It's a search
travel
engine. Exactly. But one of the interesting things that kayak does is to tell you how much effort they're doing for you. So what happened when you search on Kayak, you have a little spinner that says we're searching United, we're searching American. And not only that, but the results are rearranged in all kinds of ways. So imagine the following experiment. Condition 1, you search for a flight, you press enter, boom, you get the result immediately. Condition 2, you search for a flight, you press enter, you get 10 seconds of this wheel of death. 1, 2, 10 seconds, you just wait, then you get the same results. People hate that. Condition 3, you search for something, you press enter, you wait 10 seconds, the same 10 seconds, but those 10 seconds are filled with we're searching United, we're searching American, here are the results, we're resorting them by all kinds of things. People appreciate that more than not waiting at all. Why? Because you say to yourself, wow, look at this. It's unbelievable. All of this work was done for me. I could have never done it myself. So there's lots of things that things happen in the background, but we don't appreciate them. Now, interestingly, the same thing is also applicable for our personal lives. So imagine you go to couples, and a lot of people have done this. You go to couples, you put them in different rooms, and you say, from the 100% contribution to the family, what percentage of work do you do, and what percentage of work do you do? People say their numbers, and you add the two numbers up, and it's always more than 100%. And the reason it's more than 100% is that everybody sees the details of what they're doing. I take the trash out. There's like a 16-step process. It's involved. It's complex. It has all kinds of things. My wife, she just writes the bills. That's just the one thing. It's really simple. And one of the lessons here is to be more Kayak-like, right? When you come home, just share. Just tell people what you're doing for them, because otherwise people don't know. It's very easy to take people for granted.
How can you do it without, and maybe I'm just being naive here, how can you do it without bragging? Like in the sense that, oh, kids, I just closed a big deal so you two can go to college or whatever.
So closing a big deal is about the outcome. It's not about the process, right? But basically saying, here are the things I've done. It's more like sharing than bragging, right? Here's the complexity, and here's how my day looks like, and so on. And I also don't think you should do it every day necessarily, but from time to time, it is very useful to give people a sense of what it is that you're contributing.
And again, I guess there's two ways too, which is asking your, let's say, spouse or friend or whatever, tell me the details of your day.
Yeah.
Like unlocking those details, unlocking that meaning.
Yeah. And this idea of what is visible and invisible and what people see and don't see is actually very important. So I was in Soweto a few years ago. It's a slum in South Africa. And I saw a father buying funeral insurance for a week. People don't have money there, of course, and funerals are very expensive. So when people have a little bit of money, they sometimes go and buy funeral insurance just in case they die. And he bought this funeral insurance, and in a very ceremonious way gave the certificate to his son, and said, if something is wrong, here's the insurance. And I thought that usually when a breadwinner does something good for the family sees it, right? There's food, there's water, there's maybe kerosene, right? They see something. But when somebody is buying insurance or they're saving, the most visible thing is they're taking away from the family. They don't see that they're actually bringing anything. And what his father was doing was to take something invisible that looked like he's taking away from the family and making it visible and making it part of his contribution, right? So it's not exactly bragging. I mean, you could say maybe it is, but it is about saying, here are the things. Here's a way to represent something that I've done for the family out of selfishness, but just so everybody knows about it. And I thought it was a really interesting thing. And we've actually done all kinds of experiments on this, showing it's a very, very effective mechanism to increase saving rates, for example. The other thing, though, it's okay to jump?
Yeah, of course.
So you mentioned rules and bureaucracy. That's another thing. I feel that a lot of rules and bureaucracy are to prevent a few people from misbehaving at a tremendous cost to everybody else. So, you have I mean, organizations become more and more bureaucratic, and lawyers get the hold of it, and there's more and more rules, and everything you do, you have to follow into all kinds of little details. And I'm sure it helps avoid some problems. Somebody might have submitted an expense report for a glass of beer when in fact it's illegal, and somebody might have flown the different, I don't know, airline or class or whatever it is, and something would have happened. But at the same time, we are creating cost on everybody in the organization. And we're creating lots of systems that are all about preventing low probability bad things from happening. But the cost is we are decreasing people's autonomy and happiness, and we're increasing tremendous amount of burden on them. And I see this happening every year a bit more.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
the future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
So to some extent, these rules or these bureaucracies are standardizing people as opposed to allowing them to have more control in their lives.
Yeah, and they're probably effective in decreasing the probability that some, non-savory people would do something bad.
But in doing so, it might make the pie smaller. So you can risk.
That's right.
If you loosen the bureaucracy, you could the pie will be larger. You could risk the pie being smaller on the outliers.
Yeah, and in psychology, there's kind of this idea that people are either motivated by promotion or prevention, where they look at the glass half full or glass half empty. And I think lawyers are all about prevention. I'm not sure they have to, but I think the profession is like that.
Right. And they have to look at the worst case scenario. A contract is basically a list of worst case scenarios.
That's right. And by looking on the worst case scenario and trying to eliminate them, there's also the question of what is the cost of that, and how much are you basically decreasing the probability of businesses to do something interesting or innovative or exciting. And I really worry about that. I worry that we live in a world with so many regulations that it's just tiring and heartbreaking. There's a company, I will not mention who they are, but they recently put all their rules and regulation in a little app for their employees. So, and the idea was that their employees could all the time look at all the rules and all the regulation, what's forbidden and so on.
What would be worse is if they made the app like in your brain, so that if you started like talking to somebody in the bathroom and it would start beeping.
That's right. Maybe they could make the alert that every time you talk to somebody, but their idea was that this would just help people comply with the rules. But it just means that people think about the fact that there are rules all the time and they have to consult with this all the time. And I think that every time you open the rule book to find out if you're doing the right thing or wrong thing, you're just not interested in doing anything helpful or useful and so on. It just kind of sucks the joy out of life.
This makes me think of parenting a little bit, because I find my, best relationships with my daughters occur when I'm relaxed about the rules. I just don't want them to hurt themselves. So, the more you kind of try to establish rules, like be home by, 8 p.m., then they're not going to like you. It's not like it really matters for their overall life, later on. And, it's a good thing to relax. In general, it's a good thing to relax on with, whether it's children or spouses or colleagues or whatever.
Yeah. And it gives people a sense of autonomy and control and respect and reciprocity. And if you have a system that just has rules, it just sucks all of this away. There's another story I tell in the book. It's a story about a small company. There was a company run by this woman. And for a long time, she would just have like handshake agreement with her suppliers. And everything was fine. Then as the company was getting bigger and bigger, lawyers got into it, and they would get into discussion with the suppliers. And often the discussion was, as you said, going over worst case scenarios. What would happen if your supplies would poison our customers? And what will happen if they would be flammable? And, they would write all of these things. And they would go into meetings with the lawyers, and the suppliers felt like the lawyers were blaming them for trying to poison and,
or accusing them of a future.
That's right. And they said that they got to sign the contract, but there was no goodwill left. Before, when there was a handshake agreement, if something needed to be adjusted, that was fine. That was part of it, right? We agree to do something, and I do my best. And if I need to adjust, I adjust later. But if you're in a world that is governed by rules, and you just accuse me of all these terrible things, and now you need me to adjust, I'm not interested in doing it, right? I have no goodwill. I'll charge you for it, but I'm not going to do it out of goodwill.
And there's a similar thing in Freakonomics where the school saw that people were late at dropping off their kids, and so they penalized them. There was a financial penalty for dropping off your kids late, and more people started dropping off their kids late because now they knew the cost of dropping off their kids late. And it's the same thing here. Once you establish boundaries, it's like, okay, people understand now how far they can go over the boundaries and still have a decent life.
That's right. So this paper that you mentioned is by Uri Gnisi and Aldo Roticini, and it's a beautiful. Actually, they have two papers on this, and they basically show exactly, as you said, that when there's a goodwill, people are late from time to time, but they feel guilty about it, and they try to do something better. But when you create a fine and a rule, people say, oh, like it's $5 an hour to keep my kid in daycare. You can have them for 7 more hours, right? There's no problem. And the other thing that happened was that they took the fine away. Goodwill did not come back, right? Because when you move from what we call social norms to market norms, where you move from kind of a personal relationship where we say we'll try to help each other out, to a relationship in which, okay, this is the cost. This is like there's a menu for services. This is the cost. Feelings leave the relationship. We don't care about each other anymore. Right now, it's just transactional, right? This is what it costs. And when you take the fine away, caring doesn't show up immediately back.
Is there any way to rebuild that trust? And again, I want to remove it from the experiment to the listener. Like, how do I take this in my life and I become, improve my relationships, be more motivational to the people around me?
So, okay. So trust is really about long-term, our long-term relationship, right? So, okay. So let me say something about trust. So there's a game that economists play. It's not a real game, but it's a game that economists play, and it's called the public's good game.
Public
goods.
Okay.
And imagine the following version of the game. There are 10 people. Every day they wake up and they each get $10. And they can keep that money for themselves, or they could put it in a central pot. Whatever they put in a central pot grows 5 times during the day. In the evening, it's divided by everybody, right? So that's kind of what it means to live in a good society. You kind of put some money in a central pot, and the money increases and helps everybody else, everybody. So what happens? Day one, 10 people, $10. Everybody puts their money in. $100, multiply 5 times, 500, divide equally by everybody. Everybody gets $50, right? And this continues for a while. And it's a great world, right? You wake up in the morning, you get 10, you put in a central pot, in the evening you get 50. Wonderful world. One day, one person puts 0 in. What happens? 9 people put $10 in, $90, multiply 5 times, 450, divide equally by everybody. Everybody gets $45. One person has their 10. So everybody has 45, one person has 55, right? So that person betrayed the trust and they benefit in the short term. What do you think happened the next day?
Nobody put in.
Exactly. Nobody puts in. And the notion here is that there are kind of two equilibria. There's a resting point in which everybody participates. But if one person deviates from that, it quickly collapses to nobody participating.
But so obviously, and you mentioned this earlier, most people think in terms of short-term happiness as opposed to long-term. And there might be a lot of evolutionary or genetic reasons for this. Who knows? And also, I think there is some research that shows some people even have the gene for short-term as opposed to the gene for longer-term. And this is related to a lot of things like going to the gym, sitting down and writing or doing your research, spending extra time with my family. How do you kind of train yourself to motivate? Like, nobody would ever go to the gym for just if they were short-term motivated. You go only for long-term reasons.
Yeah.
So how do you retrain your brain to be more long-term? Even not totally, but even a little more than it is today.
Yeah. So I don't think that the right approach is to say train your brain. I think that the right approach...
I'm wrong again. You're demotivating me.
No. I think that the right approach is to figure out how you build an environment that makes you think long-term all the time. So think, for example, what is your most long-term relationship? Probably your significant other, right? What happens in that relationship? Imagine that you decide to have a day-to-day relationship, that every day you woke up, you look lovingly into your significant other's eyes, and you say, what do you say, honey? Shall we do this for another day or stop today? And, you will do it. How much would you invest in the relationship? How much would you suffer a few weeks of something difficult for the other person? Not so much, right? What happened is that we make this commitment of marriage, and we say we're going to be here for a long time. Now, it doesn't always work out, but we start with this idea of having a long-term perspective, and having a long-term perspective actually helps. The same is true, by the way, for the game I just described to you. Because if you basically are explicit and tell people, we're going to play this game every day for 10 years, people do play better. So there are things. So imagine I hire you. What's the difference between giving you an hourly contract, a weekly contract, and say, you know what, I expect you to be here for at least three years. So, I can give you all kind of examples, but I do think that trying to create a long-term relationship and basically kind of signaling to people that this is about the long term is very, very helpful.
And how do you signal to people, let's say even people you just meet or potential friends, or I don't know, just if you're speaking to an audience, which is a little more invisible connection, how do you signal to people that I'm building a long-term relationship with you?
Yeah. So there's not one recipe, but imagine that we are in January, and you basically are talking to people and what the company is going to be in December. So last year I was thinking about what to give the people who work in my research center for the end of the year, and what I decided to do was I asked everybody to tell me what is one thing that they want to learn, where in the world they want to learn it, and I said I'll send them to that place for 2 weeks to learn whatever they wanted to learn.
So you gave control, you had them think long term.
Yeah,
they had some ownership in their knowledge. They improved their skill set.
That's right. And I told them that I'm explicitly interested in them improving their skill set in any way that they want, not just in a way that I find useful, right? It says, I'm truly interested in your long-term well-being, and I'll fund something like that. Now, that's not the right answer for every organization, but it has a lot of the right elements of showing people that you're interested in them long term.
And what about self-motivation in this case? Like, so I want to think long term in terms of going to the gym or nutrition or reading.
Yeah, those things are tough. There's all kinds of ways to improve it. I'll tell you a couple of them. So the simplest version is put stuff in your calendar. We actually tried this. We had a little startup, and we basically said, you know what? The problem with the calendar is that it's good to write meetings, things that start at one point and end at one point, but it's not a natural repository for I want to exercise or read or call my mother or stuff like that. So we said, what if we created a calendar that we ask people to tell us what they want to do, and we will schedule it for them. And we would create these elements that can move in time. So if you say you want to do laundry, you can do any time in the next week, somewhere in the evening when you're home, and you can probably do a few things when you're doing laundry as well, right? You don't have to focus just on laundry. If you want to run, we should figure out if it's better for you to run in the morning or in the evening, and how many times a week, and so on. So we created a little app that basically asked people what they want to accomplish, and we took over the task of scheduling where it was going to be. And you know what? You put things on people's calendars, they start doing it. If you're a calendar person, you open your calendar and you do what you're told.
So it's interesting because this is versus, let's say that my gut response, how do you motivate somebody to exercise more, is verbally. I would teach them the benefits of, I would tell them the benefits of exercising more. But that's not an action. It's just me telling you, and you have to decide whether you're going to believe me or not. But if it's actually in your calendar, you again feel like you own it more. Like you have to actually have a reason not to do it in order to not do it.
And this is important. You actually reject it, right? So if it's written on your calendar, like if you don't exercise today, did you decide not to exercise? No, you just didn't decide to exercise. It's not the same thing. But it's if written to you that you're supposed to exercise now, and you're saying, no, I'm not exercising, it's a very different feeling, right? There's something.
And again, this is kind of this, there's an overlap between, let's say, persuasion and motivation. Because if I want to persuade you to exercise, you just gave me a method to do it. And you gave me a variety of methods to persuade people to do things and to persuade myself to do things too. I can give you my calendar and say, tell me when I should be writing and tell me when I should be exercising. And
that's right. So, and this is relying on the idea that you already want to do something in principle, but intentions are not a good recipe for action. So we need to help people by making the actions more concrete. Intentions,
thoughts, rational behavior are not motivating in general.
No, you know what? It is terribly, terribly sad. But think about all the cases in history where we had good behavioral changes for the good, for the better.
Like when?
People brushed their teeth. We put seatbelts on. We reduce smoking from 40% to 20%. Right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that we generally do. We give vaccination. We stopped throwing as much trash out of the window when the cars are driving around. There's all kinds of things we could be proud of. A little proud. But, there's all kinds of things we've done. None of them were based solely on information. Think about something like, let's just take driving. Think about seatbelts. How did we get people to wear seatbelts? Was it informational? We said, hey, this is dangerous. And people said, oh, yes, it's dangerous. Let me. No. It was fines. It was kids in the back screaming, saying, why are you tying me in your tug? And it was these annoying beeps in the car. Right? Think about texting and driving. We're unable to control this epidemic. Right? You know what happened in states that made it illegal to text and drive? Accident rate went up. You know why? Because people stop texting over the wheel and they start texting under the wheel. Right? But in all of those things, just telling people something is dangerous is no recipe for improving behavior. And here's another one. There was a recent paper that looked at all the literature ever to be conducted on financial literacy. financial literacy, we spend in the US between $700 and $800 million a year. $700 to $800 million a year. It's a lot of money to teach people how to deal with money. And you know what? When you teach people how to deal with money, they remember. Not everything, but they remember some of it. But do they act differently? Do they start saving? Do they budget? Do they spend less? I mean, what do they do in terms of real action? And the results show that the improvement is about 4%, which is tiny. The improvement is lower for people with lower social economic status, and it goes down over time. So immediately after the plan, there's an improvement of 4%, and then it goes down over time. And in total, they estimated that for $700 to $800 million a year, we get financial improvement of 0.1%. Tiny. And why? Because it's one thing to know something. I should exercise, I should eat less, and so on. It's a very, very different thing to act. So there's kind of a belief action, intention action gap. And we need to help people figure out how to close that gap.
So let's say taking just me, I want to exercise more. How should I think long term? How can I do I visualize my day and include and think long, or do I visualize myself as an healthy old man, and so that trains me to think long term?
Yeah. So look, it is possible to change some things about how we visualize ourselves and so on, but it's not the easiest path to exercising. So one path is put things on your calendar. Another path is, the term I like is that we get people to do the right thing for the wrong reason. So the right thing is to exercise. What's the wrong reason? For example, one wrong reason is to prepay to meet a trainer at the gym. And then you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like going, but you've prepaid and you're a little stingy. And you say, I don't want to lose my money. So you show up anyway. Or another wrong reason is to make an appointment to meet a friend and go exercising together. And you might not care enough about your own health, but you certainly don't want to disappoint a friend. So there's all kinds of ways to get us to behave in other ways. And then a third kind of big way is to think about habits and a little bit about religion. And to say, how do we take the behaviors that we want to carry out and we make them either habitual, which means we don't think about them, we just kind of do them without thinking. Running is a little tough, right? It's not as if, it's one thing to pick your nose as a habit or bite your nails or not knowing exactly where you're driving. But running is not something you say, oh, I'm running. Who knew? I didn't pay attention. I'm here. So for things like that, what helps is creating a system of beliefs that supports that activity. So think about religion. One of the things that religion does is to change the focus from one activity to one at a time to the system of activities. So if let's just take something non-secular, something secular. So let's imagine that you believe that good people recycle. If you just think about recycling without any beliefs, every day you wake up and you say, should I recycle? Should I not? How cold is it outside? How much money am I saving to the city? Is it worth it or not? But if you believe that good people recycle or the people who recycle go to heaven or whatever it is, you're not thinking about each activity by itself. You think about the whole enterprise of recycling. And every time you betray recycling, you betray the whole principle of it. So all of a sudden it becomes much more meaningful, right? So if you think about exercising one day at a time, there are many days you'll behave badly.
Right. It's difficult.
Very difficult. But if you think about it as a part of a system, it is much better.
This is related to actually your book, one section in your book that I really liked in the book Irrationally Yours. So that's your advice column in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you're still doing it. Are you still doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was like a collection of your columns, and there was one...
And great cartoons. Great cartoons.
Yes, and there was one section that I thought was fascinating where you basically are talking about apologies, and you basically said that if I say I'm sorry to somebody, and even if I'm insincere about it, and they know I'm insincere about it, 6 months later, everyone's still happier than if I don't say I'm sorry at all.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because and again, this is an action where all the thoughts no, this is all wrong,
Yeah.
but somehow the action cemented the happiness even 6 months later.
Yeah, and it's not just about apologies; it's also about compliments. And
So even if they're insincere and the other person knows they're insincere.
yeah, and the reason is that we cling to the slight hope that there's something in there still, right? So even if we know it's insincere, we say yes, it's insincere, but there's a little bit of it still inside.
Because I guess they had to, in order to apologize, I had to at least identify what I'm apologizing
That's
for.
right. So sometimes when even there's a hint of something positive, we cling to that, and I think actually that's a nice observation to think about motivation. And when we try to motivate ourselves and other people, we can try and think about like the big meaning of motivation. But the reality is that we want to be motivated. We want to feel that what we're doing is useful and contributing and helpful, and we want to do it, and we cling to any little piece of motivation to increase our motivation and the motivation of others. And this is what actually makes motivating people and ourselves so easy if we just tried a little bit.
So again, like let's say I'm going to give a talk or I'm going to a sales meeting and I'm meeting a whole group of people, and I want to just from beginning to end be as motivational and let's call it persuasive as possible. What are like, let's say, and I know this is just blatant to ask it this way, but what are like the three best ways to do it?
So I'm not sure about the best, but if I'm trying to do something, I would say that the first thing is to tap people's emotions, not just their cognitive thinking.
And this is by maybe giving them meaning in some way.
It could be meaning, it could be an imagery, it could be something like that. The second thing is to get people to play an active role rather than a passive role in the I'm not saying get people to do something, but it's about getting people to think of themselves as part of the process and to imagine a different life. So you gave the example earlier that if we think about ourselves at an older age, we're motivated. So if you show people pictures, pictures, I take a picture of you now and I age it with some algorithm to show you how you would look when you're 70.
Don't scare me.
People save more for retirement, right? Kind of seeing, getting a more visceral image of the aspect. And then I would say the other one is a sense of control, a sense that you can actually make things different if you took those aspects. You took those steps.
All right. Well, Dan Ariely, author of Payoff, which is, again, you don't have to call it this. I'm going to call it kind of a descendant of Man's Search for Meaning.
Thank you.
And also author of Irrational Yours, Predictably Irrational, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, your great documentary on dishonesty.
By the way, this reminds me, you started by asking me a question about dishonesty. We never got to it.
Well,
another time.
Another time. But there is a relationship between motivation and dishonesty. I'll tell you one quick story, and then we'll end this. The dishonesty documentary scared the hell out of me.
It is scary.
And I'll tell you why. There's a specific story in there. So this was 10 years ago, so no one could throw me in jail right now, or maybe not, I don't know. I wanted my daughter to switch schools. And now she wasn't always living with me. She was living with her mom most of the time, who lived in a different town. But I listed her as living with me so she could switch to this school. Now, the woman who did that in the documentary goes to jail.
Not only goes to jail, her father goes to jail, and he passed away in jail.
Now, and so what I am going to ask you, it has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. I'm white. They were African-American. Nobody touched me, asked me, even gave it one thought of consideration. And clearly she was just thinking of her kids. Like, she really didn't do anything unethical, in my opinion. And she goes to jail for that.
Yeah. So she started with this interrogation of what was going on. She did fake documents later on to try and get herself out. And that just got her more deeper and deeper.
I would have probably faked documents too, though.
I think that there's clearly something about being African American that was a part of this, but part of it was also her fear was so high that she tried to dig her way out and only dug herself more in.
I see. All right. Well, it scared the hell out of me. Thanks very much. I recommend people read it to see all the outcomes of these and read the book Payoff. And I'll see you next time, Dan.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Well, thanks so much.
This passed very quickly.
For more from James, check out The James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free Insiders list today. Hey, thanks for listening. Listen, I have a big favor to ask you, and it will only take 30 seconds or less, and it would mean a huge amount to me. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let the team I work with know. Please let my guests know. And you can do this easily by subscribing to the podcast. It's probably the biggest favor you could do for me right now, and it's really simple. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Again, it will only take you 30 seconds or less, and if you subscribe now, it will really help me out a lot. Thanks again.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.